Marcos Engineering, Part 1, Stepping into the 60s. Marcos, a name you've probably never heard of before, were a small British sports car company who manufactured some stunning vehicles in their lifetime. However, much like most manufacturers, they had their ups and downs, and I'll guide you through the history of Marcos in 3 separate posts on the 3 eras. Without further ado, let's begin. 1959 to 1972, the birth of the GT. In 1959, 2 Welshmen by the names of Jem Marsh and Frank Costin founded Marcos. The Marcos name was created using the first 3 letters of each of the founders' surnames. All early Marcos vehicles were made using marine plywood, which was an extremely lightweight material at the time, and Costin had worked on de Havilland Mosquito fighter bombers, so he knew of its advantages. The early GT prototypes, built in 1959 and 1960, had some very unique features. The roof was very high to be able to accommodate the very tall Jem Marsh. It had gull-wing doors, and it also had a 4-piece split windscreen. They were powered by either a 1.1 litre or 1.2 litre Ford engines. They were also hugely successful in motorsport, driven by many people such as Jem and the legend Jackie Stewart. There was also a production variant of which only 39 examples were produced. They retained the gull-wing doors of the race car and used many handling components from the Triumph Herald. Also, engine sizes could vary from 1 litre of displacement up to 1.5 litres. During 1961, Costin was replaced by the Adams brothers, Peter and Dennis, on the design team, and together they created the Marcos Luton Gullwing, which would ultimately lead to the creation of the Fastback GT. 'Twas 1963 and Marcos revealed the reworked Fastback GT. This time it did not have gull-wing doors, and to homologate for sports car racing it weighed in at a mere 475 kilograms, 1,047 pounds. As with every other early Marcos race car, it was very successful in its category. 1964 brought the road variant, dubbed the GT, with various engine size prefixes such as the 1800 GT using a Volvo 1.8 litre engine, which was their most popular model, but production costs were high. During 1966, to reduce production costs, Marcos opted to use a more conventional suspension system and have the option of a Ford V4 engine. 1966 marked the first year of US exportation, and due to emissions regulations had to use a Volvo inline-6 for the 3-litre model. The year before, in 1965, Marcos introduced their own mini kit car as a cheaper alternative to the GT, called the Mini Marcos. It was not, however, successful as a road car, and it was better as a race car. The Mini Marcos was the only British automobile to finish the 1966 24 Hours of Le Mans, and it continued production until 1975, 3 years after the company went into liquidation. More on that towards the end of the post. The Marcos Mantis M70 was introduced in 1968 as a 2+2-seater sports car, which is regarded as one of the ugliest British cars in history. It was powered by a 2.5 litre inline-6 from the Triumph TR6. On the contrary, the race variant, called the XP, is one of the most good-looking race cars of the 1960s. It had a very angular design and was powered by a mid-mounted Brabham V8. Marcos raced it at Spa in 1968, but electronic problems caused by heavy rain forced it to pull out. And then, disaster struck for the company in 1971. Unsuccessful sales of the Mantis M70 and many unsold vehicles in the US, coupled with a very expensive move to new premises, caused Marcos to unfortunately go into its first voluntary liquidation in 1972. The Rob Waker Group continued Marcos production for a few years after buying all the assets. At the moment it's not looking too good for Marcos, but all will be explained in the next part of the story. I hope you enjoyed the first part of my story on Marcos, and I'll see you again in part 2.